Little Red Riding Hood. Once upon a time, in a small village surrounded by a dense, magical forest, there lived a little girl with bright eyes and a kind heart. She was loved by everyone who knew her because she was sweet, helpful, and full of energy. She always wore a bright red hooded cape that her grandmother had made for her as a gift. The cape was soft and warm, and the little girl loved it so much that she wore it everywhere, no matter the season. Because of this, everyone in the village called her Little Red Riding Hood. Little Red Riding Hood lived with her mother in a cozy cottage. Her father was a woodcutter who often traveled deep into the forest for work. She missed him when he was away, but she and her mother spent their days baking bread, tending the garden, and feeding the chickens in their yard. One sunny spring morning, Little Red Riding Hood was helping her mother bake fresh bread when her mother turned to her with a smile. "Little Red Riding Hood," she said, "I have a special task for you today." "What is it, Mother?" she asked eagerly, always happy to help. "Your grandmother has not been feeling well. I have packed a basket with fresh bread, cheese, and a jar of honey. I want you to take it to her cottage at the other end of the forest." "Oh, I would love to visit Grandmother," Little Red Riding Hood said with excitement. Her mother's smile faded slightly, and her tone became serious. "But remember, the forest can be dangerous. You must stay on the path, do not wander, and do not talk to strangers. Do you promise?" Little Red Riding Hood nodded earnestly. "I promise, Mother." Her mother placed a kiss on her forehead and handed her the basket. "Be careful, my dear." With the basket in hand, Little Red Riding Hood set off. The forest was alive with the sounds of birds chirping and squirrels chattering. Sunlight streamed through the tall trees, casting golden patterns on the ground. She skipped along the path, humming a tune to herself. The forest seemed magical to her. She marveled at the way the leaves danced in the breeze and stopped to watch a family of rabbits hop across the trail. She imagined what other wonders she might find in the woods. After walking for a while, she came across a patch of wildflowers. They were vibrant and colorful, with petals in shades of yellow, blue, and pink. Little Red Riding Hood stopped in her tracks. Grandmother would love these flowers, she thought. She placed her basket down carefully and began picking the prettiest blooms she could find. While she was busy gathering flowers, a shadowy figure emerged from behind the trees. It was a wolf with sharp teeth and a long, bushy tail. His yellow eyes gleamed with cunning, and his nose twitched as he caught the scent of Little Red Riding Hood. The wolf crept closer, his steps silent on the forest floor. When he was close enough, he spoke in a silky voice. "Good morning, little girl. What are you doing all alone in the forest?" Startled, Little Red Riding Hood turned around and saw the wolf. But she wasn't afraid. He smiled at her with what looked like kindness. "I'm picking flowers for my grandmother," she said. "She isn't feeling well, so I'm bringing her a basket of food." "How sweet of you," said the wolf. "And where does your grandmother live?" "She lives in a cottage at the end of this path," Little Red Riding Hood answered, pointing ahead. "It's not far from here." The wolf's smile grew wider, but Little Red Riding Hood didn't notice the sly glint in his eyes. What a wonderful granddaughter you are. Well, I won't keep you. Do enjoy your walk." "Thank you, Mr. Wolf," she said, returning to her flower picking. But as she gathered more flowers, the wolf disappeared into the trees. He was not headed back to his den. No, he had a plan. He would reach grandmother's house first. The wolf was fast and clever. He took a shortcut through the forest and soon arrived at grandmother's cottage. The little house was cozy with a thatched roof and a small garden blooming with herbs and flowers. The wolf knocked on the door, mimicking a sweet, high-pitched voice. "It's me, Little Red Riding Hood. I've brought you some food to help you feel better." Grandmother, who was lying in bed under a warm quilt, called out weakly, "Come in, my dear." The wolf opened the door, stepped inside, and locked it behind him. Grandmother gasped when she saw him. "You're not my granddaughter. You're a wolf." The wolf pounced on grandmother and swallowed her whole in one gulp. Then he put on her nightgown and cap, climbed into bed, and pulled the quilt up to his chin. He chuckled to himself, thinking of how easily he had fooled her. Meanwhile, Little Red Riding Hood was back on the path, carrying her basket and the bouquet of flowers. She was excited to see her grandmother and tell her about the beautiful things she had seen in the forest. When she reached the cottage, she noticed the door was slightly open. This surprised her because grandmother always kept her doors shut. "Grandmother," she called as she stepped inside. "I'm in bed, my dear," came a voice from the bedroom. It sounded a little strange, but Little Red Riding Hood thought her grandmother might just be tired. She walked into the bedroom and saw her grandmother lying in bed. But something seemed different. The room was darker than usual, and grandmother's face looked odd. "Grandmother," she said hesitantly, "what big ears you have." "The better to hear you with, my dear," said the wolf. "Grandmother, what big eyes you have." "The better to see you with, my dear." "Grandmother, what big hands you have." "The better to hug you with, my dear." "Grandmother, what big teeth you have." Little Red Riding Hood exclaimed. "The better to eat you with," the wolf roared, jumping out of bed. Little Red Riding Hood screamed and tried to run, but the wolf was too quick. Just as he lunged at her, a loud crash came from the door. It was the woodsman who had been nearby chopping trees. He had heard Little Red Riding Hood scream and rushed to help. Bursting into the room with his axe, he shouted, "Leave her alone, you wicked wolf!" The wolf snarled and lunged at the woodsman, but the woodsman was strong and brave. He swung his axe, scaring the wolf away. The frightened animal fled into the forest, howling. The woodsman looked around the room and saw that grandmother was missing. Thinking quickly, he cut open the wolf's belly, and to everyone's relief, grandmother climbed out, alive and well. Grandmother hugged Little Red Riding Hood tightly. "Oh, my dear, I'm so glad you're safe." "I'm sorry, Grandmother," Little Red Riding Hood said, tears in her eyes. "I didn't listen to Mother's advice. I wandered off the path, and I talked to a stranger." Her grandmother smiled kindly. "What's important is that you're safe now, and you've learned a valuable lesson." The woodsman stayed for tea, and they all shared the food from the basket. They talked and laughed, grateful to be together. From that day on, Little Red Riding Hood always listened to her mother. She stayed on the path, avoided strangers, and was more careful in the forest. And so Little Red Riding Hood, her grandmother, and the woodsman lived happily ever after.
Thank you so much for watching this story. If it touched your heart, please give this video a thumbs up and share it with someone who might need a little hope today. Remember, even the smallest acts of kindness can make a big difference in someone's life. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories like this one, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. We appreciate your support, and together, let's spread kindness and positivity to the world. Take care, and we'll see you in the next video.